Alright, I'm Mrs. Hebert and I'm going to show you some painting techniques. We're going to use temper cakes, which are really easy to work with, and it helps to, these have been used already, but it helps to put a little dot of water in each color as you're getting started. And if the paint is a little bit dirty, you can just take a paper towel, even a little water, and clean it up. As I'm painting, I like to have a variety of different brushes, different sizes and shapes, and a half full container of water. And there, that's going to be a little bit better to start. I also like to keep a paper towel with me to dab my brush on. So usually when you start painting, you take your brushes and you work on the dry paper. So if I'm starting with wet on dry, that just means making, and you can make different marks depending on the different kinds of brushes that you have. A thin brush, if you press down and then lift up, you can get different types of lines. So it's fun to just practice different marks. These brushes with the green handle have a lot more control and detail, and these flat brushes can make some bigger, fatter marks. Wet on wet means an area is wet, and then you take your paint, and when you put it into a wet area, it runs and spreads. And if you have a couple different colors, you can get almost a tie-dye effect. So you try to imagine all the different ways that you could use a wet on wet technique. So right here along the edge of where this paper is dry, you actually can have a lot of control with the wet on wet technique because the paint won't go where the water isn't. A dry brush is another one of my favorite techniques and can be used to create different textures. So if I wanted to make some grass or fur on an animal, if I have enough paint, and you can use your paper towel to help you with this, enough paint and just some a brush, I think it should be a little bit drier, there. Now I'm getting some textured marks from my paintbrush, and these wooden handled temper brushes work really well for a dry brush effect. A wash is one of the most basic techniques, and it's a great way to start. A wash is paint, water, and you basically cover an area. A glaze we'll come back to in a second, but here's a graduated wash. You can do like an ombre of colors that I did earlier, where it goes from blue to green and then even a little bit of yellow. Sgraffito is one of my favorite techniques. So if I have some paint in this area and then I want to scratch into it, this term, sgraffito, comes from, I don't know if you can see that, I can write a secret message or just create texture, and that can be used with oil pastel or any thick paint. It works especially well. If I had another layer of paint underneath, I could scratch through and see the other color coming through. But sgraffito comes from the Italian to scratch, so that's why it sounds like the word graffiti. A wax resist can be done with any oil-based material, and in this case I have, let's do some crayon over here. I'm going to put it on thick and then make a pattern, and then with my oil pastels I'll put it on, I'll use the side of the oil pastel, like makes that kind of mark, and I'll put it on really thick here, and then let's see, what can I make? I'll make a little flower design just so you can see what happens. What do you predict will happen when I paint over this, Ryan?
Mix in with the paint.
Do you it might mix in with the paint? Mm-hmm. Other possible things that might happen? let's find out. Will the oil pastel and the crayon mix in with the paint as Ryan predicts? I'm gonna take my purple and I'm gonna put a wash over the top. I need a little bit more water here. I'm gonna put a wash over the top of this pink, and you can still see, let's see, I used a little bit too much water. That wasn't a great example. Let me try something more. If I use a crayon up here, I think it's hard to see that one, and then I wash over it. You have to control how much paint you use. Ah, there, now you can really see that the oil and water don't really mix, so you still see the crayon work underneath, and the oil pastel works really, really nicely for this. So use a little blue. I'm gonna put a wash. Oh wow, see how it fills in all those cracks where I use the side, and if it's really thick it doesn't show. Okay, so that's another technique you can use when you combine materials. And I just want to point out that Sharpie pens are waterproof, so when I paint over them, they don't show up. Finally, I want to show you a glaze. So you can mix colors by layering them in art too, and oftentimes a glaze color, if you wanted to create something that looks like it's got sunshine pouring over it, you can use a yellow glaze. So where I put another wash over the top of the existing purple wash, that's kind of what it looks like. And you can experiment with what would it look like if I had a greenish yellow glaze, or multiple different layers. Those translucent colors mix in that way. So there are some different techniques that you can experiment with in addition to experimenting with types of painting. I would love to see you try several new techniques in your work.